Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be diving into something that I think a lot of you are interested in, prepping for the Certified Business Continuity Auditor exam.
Yes.
You've given us 25 sample questions and answers.
Yeah.
So let's unpack the certification and see what we can learn.
Yeah, it's really incredible how this kind of expertise is becoming so sought after.
Yeah.
Every organization really needs to be ready for anything these days.
Right.
And a CBCA certification shows that you can help them do exactly that.
All right, so let's jump right into question one.
Correct.
Question one asks us to explain the difference between assessments and audits.
Well, the key here is the level of formality an assessment can be any kind of evaluation, really.
Right.
But an audit is much more structured.
Okay.
An official, think of it like a pop quiz versus a final exam.
Right.
They both test your knowledge, but the stakes are higher with the exam.
So an audit gives you more confidence in the results because it follows a stricter process.
Exactly. Now, question two gets into the different roles involved in an audit.
Okay.
The auditor, the auditee, and the client.
Okay, so who's who in this scenario?
Well, think of it like you're going to see a doctor.
Okay.
The client is the one who made the appointment. That's the organization that wants the audit.
Okay.
The auditee is the patient.
Right.
That could be a specific department or process that's being audited.
Gotcha.
And the auditor is the doctor,
right,
examining the patient and providing their professional opinion.
So to continue that analogy,
the
client is the one who ultimately decides what the doctor examines, right?
Yeah, you got the client sets the scope of the audit, meaning they decide what the auditor will focus on.
Gotcha.
Question 3 asks, who should issue organizational policies?
Okay.
This gets at the heart of how policies actually get enforced.
So it's not just anyone who can decide these things?
Not at all. Policies have to come from the top down.
Okay.
The source material is very specific here.
Okay.
It has to be someone at the highest level of management, someone with the authority to make sure everyone follows those policies.
Makes sense. You need that top-level buy-in to really make policies stick.
Exactly.
Question 4 is about auditor independence and why it's so important.
Imagine if an auditor was tasked with auditing their own company or maybe a close friend's business.
Right.
Could they really be impartial and objective?
Probably not.
Exactly. Even the appearance of a conflict of interest can undermine an audit's credibility.
Yeah, that seems like a recipe for disaster.
Now, question 5 gets into assurance methods, specifically which ones are considered acceptable for external use.
So like if you were using this certification for a job that requires an official audit.
Precisely what's interesting here is that only independent audits are acceptable for things like licensing or regulatory compliance.
Okay.
Internal audits are helpful for an organization's internal improvement, but they don't carry the same weight externally.
So if you're looking to use this certification to prove your skills to the outside world, you need that independent audit backing you up.
Exactly.
Now, question 6 is about a distinction that always trips me up.
Okay.
Standards versus guidelines.
I think this is easier to understand if you think about driving.
Okay.
Standards are like traffic laws. They're non-negotiables. You have to follow them.
Right.
Guidelines are more like suggestions from your GPS.
Okay.
They can be helpful, but they're not mandatory.
Okay. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Good.
Standards are the rules, guidelines are the helpful tips.
Exactly.
Question 7 talks about non-audit roles.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean?
This is all about avoiding conflicts of interest.
Okay.
The source material is very clear.
Yeah.
If someone is involved in creating, running, or managing the systems being audited, they can't be the auditor.
Okay.
They need to be completely independent.
So no wearing multiple hats when it comes to audits. You can't be both the player and the referee.
Exactly.
Question 8 talks about ongoing audit programs, especially for staying compliant with regulations.
This is where things get really interesting.
Right.
Instead of one big annual audit, a series of shorter, more focused projects throughout the year can be much more effective.
Okay.
It allows you to really dig deep into specific areas and be more proactive about compliance.
So it's like taking a more agile approach to auditing.
Exactly.
Constantly checking and adjusting instead of just waiting for the annual checkup.
That's a great way to put it.
That makes a lot of sense. Question 9 brings up ISACA's professional ethics statement.
Yes.
What's that all about?
Think about professions like doctors or lawyers.
Okay.
They have strict ethical codes to maintain public trust.
Right.
Auditors are no different. The ISACA statement outlines those ethical principles.
Okay.
Things like honesty, objectivity, and confidentiality.
So it's not just about technical skills, it's about ethical conduct as well. Makes sense. You're dealing with a lot of sensitive information.
Exactly.
Question 10 is about the basis of an auditor's final opinion. What factors go into that?
This one is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
An auditor's opinion has to be grounded in evidence.
Uh-huh.
It can't be based on gut feelings, assumptions, or what management wants to hear.
Right.
They need solid proof to back up their conclusions.
So like a detective building a case.
Exactly.
It's all about the facts.
That's right. Now on to question 11. What are the different types of audits?
Okay.
The source material highlights 6 main types: financial, operational, compliance, administrative, forensic, and information systems audits.
Wow.
Each focuses on a different aspect of an organization.
Could you give me some examples of what each type might cover?
Of course, a financial audit would look at the organization's financial records and statements. Operational audits focus on efficiency and effectiveness,
Okay.
maybe looking at a specific department or process. Compliance audits ensure the organization is following all applicable laws and regulations. Administrative audits examine internal controls and administrative procedures.
Gotcha.
Forensic audits investigate potential fraud or misconduct.
Okay.
And finally, information systems audits assess the security and integrity of an organization's IT systems.
Wow. So many different types.
Yeah.
Seems like there's an audit for just about everything.
It seems that way.
Question 12 asks us to distinguish between a policy and a procedure.
Okay.
Those terms often get used interchangeably, but I know there's a difference.
Absolutely. A policy is the what. It's a high-level statement of what needs to be done.
Okay.
A procedure is the how.
Okay.
It outlines the specific steps to achieve what the policy mandates.
Okay, so let's say the policy is all employees must wear ID badges.
Right.
The procedure would then detail how to obtain the badge, what information it needs to display, and how to wear it correctly.
Exactly. That's a great example.
Okay, perfect.
Now, question 13 asks about standard terms of reference. Why are those important in an audit?
I'm guessing it has something to do with clear communication.
Yes.
Making sure everyone is on the same page.
Precisely.
What's going on.
It's like speaking the same language.
Okay.
Standard terms of reference eliminate any ambiguity or confusion.
Right.
By clearly defining the scope, objectives, and terminology of the audit.
So no room for misinterpretations or misunderstanding.
Exactly.
Everyone knows exactly what's expected.
That's right. Now, question 14 gets into a serious topic: who is held liable for internal control failures?
Oh, okay.
According to the source material, the ultimate responsibility lies with the top executives.
Okay.
The president, vice presidents, and other true corporate officers.
Okay.
They're the ones the government holds accountable when things go wrong.
Wow. So the buck really does stop at the top.
It does.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown, as they say.
Indeed.
Question 15 is about the roles of data owner, data user, and data custodian.
No.
Could you break down those roles for me?
Let's use a library as an analogy.
Okay.
The data owner is like the library board.
Okay.
They set the rules and policies for how the data is used and managed.
Gotcha.
The data custodian is like the librarian.
Okay.
They are responsible for the day-to-day management and protection of the data. And the data users are the library patrons.
Go.
They access and use the data within the rules established by the owner and custodian.
That's a great analogy.
Good.
So the owner sets the rules, the custodian manages the books, and the users borrow and read them.
Exactly.
Question 16 brings up the concept of fiduciary responsibility.
Yes, this is a huge one.
What does that mean in the context of auditing?
Fiduciary responsibility means acting in the best interests of another party, putting their needs above your own. In auditing, this means always putting the client's interests first and being completely transparent and ethical in your dealings.
So it's a very serious responsibility.
It's a huge responsibility and one that should never be taken lightly.
Wow, that's a lot to take in, but I can definitely see why it's so important.
Yeah.
You're handling sensitive information and making recommendations that can have a big impact on an organization.
Absolutely.
Question 17 circles back to the auditor's final opinion. What are the key factors in forming that opinion?
It all comes down to evidence and professional skepticism. The auditor gathers evidence, analyzes it carefully, and uses their professional judgment to form an opinion.
Okay.
They don't just take anyone's word for it. They need to see the proof.
So it's about being thorough, objective, and questioning everything.
Exactly.
You can't let biases or assumptions cloud your judgment.
That's right. On to question 18. What about the auditor's role in remediation?
Okay.
Let's say they find a problem. What happens next?
Right.
It's important to maintain a clear separation of duties here.
Okay.
The auditor's job is to identify problems and make recommendations for fixing them. But they shouldn't be involved in actually implementing the solutions.
Okay.
That's the auditee's responsibility.
So you point out the issues, but you don't fix them yourself.
That's right.
It's like a doctor diagnosing an illness.
Exactly.
They prescribe the treatment, but the patient is responsible for taking the medicine.
Exactly. Question 19 brings us to the concept of a product audit.
Okay, we talked about different types of audits earlier, but this one wasn't on the list.
That's because it's a more specialized type of audit.
Okay.
Focused on a specific product rather than an entire organization.
Gotcha.
The goal is to make sure the product meets its design specifications.
So it's like quality control for a new gadget or software program.
Uh-huh.
Making sure it works as intended and meets all the requirements.
You got it. Now, question 20 stresses the importance of protecting audit documentation.
Right. Why is that so important?
Think about all the high-profile data breaches we hear about these days. Audit documentation often contains sensitive information about an organization's finances, operations, and security practices.
Right.
If that information falls into the wrong hands, it could be disastrous.
So it's not just about protecting the physical documents, it's about digital security as well.
Exactly. Secure storage access, controls, encryption.
Right.
These are all critical for protecting audit documentation.
Makes sense. It would be a huge liability if that information fell into the wrong hands.
Absolutely. Okay, question 21 seems like a small detail.
Okay.
But I know it can be important. What's the difference between should and shall in regulations?
Yeah, that can be tricky.
This is a common point of confusion.
Yes.
Should is a recommendation.
Okay.
It's good practice, but not strictly required.
Okay.
Shall, on the other hand, means it's mandatory. There's no wiggle room there. You have to do it.
Okay, so should is like a friendly suggestion, while shall is a direct order.
Exactly. Question 22 addresses the auditor's obligation to disclose any irregularities they uncover.
Okay.
The source material specifies that they should first report it internally, typically to a higher level of management within the organization.
So not immediately going to the authorities, but following a clear internal reporting process.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Question 23 is about the audit committee. What role does this committee play?
Think of the audit committee as the guardians of good governance. They are typically made up of board members and have the authority to hire external auditors, review their findings, and address any concerns.
Wow.
They act as a crucial layer of oversight, ensuring that audits are conducted properly and that any issues are addressed appropriately.
So they're like the watchdogs.
Yes.
Keeping an eye on the entire audit process.
Exactly. That brings us to question 24, the concept of governance itself.
Right. It seems like a big, broad term. How would you define it?
Governance is essentially about making sure the right people are making intelligent decisions and taking appropriate actions.
Okay.
It's about having a clear framework for decision-making, accountability, and transparency. In the context of auditing, good governance ensures that audits are conducted ethically and effectively, and that their findings are used to improve the organization.
Okay, so good governance is about having the right structures and processes in place to ensure that everything runs smoothly and ethically.
Exactly. Now for our final question in this part.
Okay.
Question 25. What is the difference between a threat and a vulnerability?
Right.
Think of it like this. A threat is like a potential burglar casing your house.
Okay.
They are a danger, but they haven't actually broken in yet. A vulnerability is like a window left unlocked.
Okay.
It's a weakness in your security that the burglar could exploit to gain entry.
So the threat is the potential danger, and the vulnerability is what makes that danger a reality.
That's a great way to summarize it.
That makes a lot of sense. Wow, we covered a lot of ground in this first part.
We did.
I'm already feeling much more confident about the CBCA exam.
Excellent. We've only just scratched the surface, but don't worry, we'll keep digging deeper in the next part.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the CBCA exam. Ready to tackle the next set of questions.
Absolutely, bring them on.
Okay, so question 11 dives into different types of audits, and you've given us some great real-world examples already. What stands out to you about these different approaches?
Well, what strikes me is how they each focus on a different aspect of an organization. It's not just about the finances. It's about efficiency, security, even potential fraud.
Right.
Makes me realize how comprehensive this CBCA certification really is.
That's a great observation. It highlights how a business continuity auditor needs to be a jack of all trades in a sense,
Yeah,
understanding risks across a wide range of areas.
absolutely. Okay, on to question 12. This one's about the difference between a policy and a procedure,
Okay.
which always seems to trip people up.
The answer here is really about levels of detail. A policy is that high-level, big-picture statement, often signed by someone in authority that makes compliance mandatory.
Right.
The procedure, on the other hand, spells out exactly how to achieve that compliance,
Yeah.
step by step.
So it's like the policy sets the goal and the procedure is the roadmap to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, question 13 highlights the importance of standard terms of reference. Why do you think that is?
Well, based on what we've discussed so far, it seems like clear communication is crucial in an audit.
Yes.
Everyone needs to be on the same page about what's being examined, how it's being assessed,
Yeah.
and what the terminology means.
You're spot on. Standard terms of reference ensure that the auditor and everyone involved in the audit are speaking the same language,
Right.
eliminating any ambiguity or confusion.
Okay, on to question 14, which is about who's ultimately responsible when internal controls fail.
This is where the rubber meets the road. According to the source material, it's the top executives,
Okay.
the vice presidents and other high-level corporate officers
Right.
who are held liable by the government for these failures.
So the buck really does stop at the top when it comes to internal controls.
It does.
High stakes indeed. Question 15 takes us back to the world of data, this time focusing on the roles of data owner, data user, and data custodian.
Remember our library analogy? We can apply it here too. The data owner is like the library board setting the rules and policies for the data.
Okay.
The data custodian is the librarian managing and protecting the data on a daily basis.
Right.
And the data users are the patrons accessing and using the data within the established rules.
Okay, that analogy really helps. It clarifies who's responsible for what when it comes to data management. Question 16 is about fiduciary responsibility,
Yes.
which seems like a pretty weighty concept.
It is. It's the highest standard of duty implied by law
Wow.
for anyone in a position of trust, like a trustee or guardian.
Okay.
In this context, it means the auditor has a legal and ethical obligation to act in the best interests of the client, putting their needs ahead of their own.
So it's not just about being competent. It's about being trustworthy and acting with integrity.
Exactly. Now, question 17 reinforces something we've touched on before,
Yeah.
the importance of evidence informing the auditor's final opinion.
Right. No gut feelings or assumptions allowed.
Precisely. The answer here emphasizes that the auditor must gather sufficient evidence through testing and analysis to support their conclusions.
Oh.
It's about being thorough and objective, always letting the evidence guide the opinion.
Question 18 is about the auditor's role in remediation, the process of fixing any problems that are uncovered.
The key here is to avoid any conflict of interest.
Okay.
While the auditor identifies issues and makes recommendations, they should not be involved in designing or implementing the solutions.
So they point out the problems, but leave the fixing to someone else.
Exactly. It helps to maintain that all-important auditor independence. Now, question 19 introduces the concept of a product audit.
We talked about different types of audits earlier.
Yes.
But this one wasn't on the list.
That's because it's a more specialized type of audit,
Okay.
focused on a specific product rather than an entire organization.
Gotcha.
The goal is to make sure the product meets its design specifications.
So it's like quality control for a new gadget or software program, making sure it works as intended and meets all the requirements.
You got it. Now, question 20 stresses the importance of protecting audit documentation. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, we've talked about data security before, and it seems like audit documentation could be a prime target for hackers or anyone looking to steal sensitive information. It probably contains all sorts of confidential data about an organization's finances, operations, and security practices.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
The source material highlights the need for secure storage access controls and even encryption to protect this documentation from unauthorized access or disclosure.
Makes sense. It would be a huge liability if that information fell into the wrong hands.
Right.
Now, question 21 might seem like a small detail,
Okay.
but it's about the difference between should and shall in regulations.
This can be tricky, but it's important to get it right. Should indicates a recommendation.
Okay.
Something that's good practice, but not strictly required. Shall, however, means it's a mandatory requirement. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Okay, so should is like a friendly suggestion, while shall is a direct order. Question 22 addresses the auditor's obligation to disclose any irregularities they uncover.
The source material emphasizes that the initial disclosure should be made internally,
Okay.
typically to a higher level of management within the organization.
Right.
It's about responsible escalation, giving the organization a chance to address the issue before involving external parties.
Okay, so it's about following a clear internal reporting process.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Question 23 explains the role of the audit committee. What are your thoughts on this group?
They play a crucial role in ensuring accountability and transparency. They're typically made up of board members and have the authority to hire external auditors,
Okay.
review their findings, and take action on any issues that arise. They're like the independent watchdogs of the audit process.
They hold a lot of power. Question 24 defines governance as the process of ensuring that the right people are making intelligent decisions and taking appropriate actions.
It's about having a clear framework for decision-making with the right people in the right roles, operating with transparency and accountability.
Right.
Good governance is essential for any organization, especially when it comes to something as important as auditing.
It seems like good governance is the foundation for everything else we've talked about today.
Yeah.
And finally, question 25, the last one in this set, provides a really clear distinction between a threat and a vulnerability.
Remember our burglar analogy?
Yes.
The threat is like the burglar casing your house, the potential danger. The vulnerability is the unlocked window, the weakness that the burglar can exploit to make that danger a reality.
Okay, so threats need vulnerabilities to actually become problems.
That's a great way to summarize it. And with that, we've covered all 25 questions and their answers.
Wow, that's a whirlwind tour of business continuity auditing.
It was.
But I have to say, I feel much more informed and confident about this field now.
You've done a great job absorbing all this information. Remember, the key is not just to memorize the answers, but to understand the concepts and apply them in real-world situations.
Absolutely. And I think our deep dive into these questions has really helped me do that.
Great. Now, there's one more thing I want to bring up that wasn't explicitly mentioned in the questions, but I think it's essential for any aspiring business continuity auditor.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's really amazing how much we've been able to unpack about this whole world of business continuity auditing just from these 25 questions.
Yeah, it's really a testament to how well-crafted these sample questions are.
Yeah.
They really touch on all the core concepts that you would need to understand for the CBCA exam. Okay,
so you were about to share a final thought that wasn't explicitly covered in these questions.
Yes, it's the idea of continuous learning.
Okay.
The world of business continuity is constantly evolving.
Right.
New threats emerge, technologies change, regulations are updated. A successful auditor needs to be a lifelong learner. Always staying on top of the latest trends and best practices.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You can't just pass the exam and then just coast.
Right.
You need to keep your skills sharp and your knowledge up to date.
Exactly. Read industry publications, attend conferences, connect with other professionals. The more you learn, the better equipped you'll be to handle the challenges of business continuity auditing.
So it's almost like being a detective, always on the lookout for new clues, new ways to solve the case.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what stands out to you as the most crucial takeaway from all of these questions?
For me, it's the importance of auditor independence.
Okay.
It came up again and again in the questions, and for good reason. It's the foundation of everything an auditor does. Without independence, there's no trust, no credibility, no value in the audit.
I completely agree. It's like that saying, justice must not only be done, it must also be seen to be done.
That's right.
The same applies to auditing. It must not only be unbiased, but it must also be perceived as unbiased.
Well said. And building on that, I think the questions also highlighted the importance of ethics.
Yeah.
The ISACA's professional ethics statement really drives home the point that auditors have a duty to act with integrity, honesty, and confidentiality.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's not just about following the rules. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one is watching.
Exactly. And finally, I think the questions did a great job of emphasizing the importance of evidence-based decision-making.
Yes.
Whether it's forming an audit opinion, assessing risks, or recommending remediation steps, it all comes down to the facts.
Right. Gut feelings and assumptions have no place in auditing.
No.
It's all about gathering evidence, analyzing it carefully, and drawing conclusions based on the data.
Exactly. It's about being a critical thinker, a problem solver, and a champion for truth and accuracy.
Well, I have to say, I'm feeling much more prepared
Good.
and confident about taking the CBCA exam now.
That's great.
This deep dive has been incredibly helpful.
I'm glad to hear that. Remember, this is just the beginning of your journey.
Yeah.
The world of business continuity auditing is full of challenges and rewards, and with the right mindset and a commitment to continuous learning, I have no doubt you'll succeed.
Thanks for guiding us through this deep dive.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Wonderful. And to our listeners, good luck with your CBCA journey.
Yes.
Stay curious, keep learning, and never stop asking questions.